Hello student, Assalamu alaikum. Hope all of you doing well. In labor economics, today we are going to learn about the labor demand. Learning outcomes. After watching this video, you will be able to understand what is labor demand curve, and shifts factors, that is, factor affecting the labor demand curve. So, demand for labor. The demand for labor is an economics principle derived from the demand for a firm's output. This is, if demand for a firm output increases, the firm will demand more labor, thus hiring more staff. Those seeking employment will supply their labor in exchange for wages. What is demand for labor? When producing goods and services, business requires labor and capital as inputs to their production process. The demand for labor is an economics principle derived from the demand for a firm's output. That is, if demand for a firm's output increases, the firm will demand more labor, thus hiring more staff. And if the demand for the firm's output of goods and services decreases, in turn, it will require less labor and its demand for labor will fall and less staff will be retained. Labor demand. So, labor market factors derive the supply and demand for labor. Those seeking employment will supply their labor in exchange for wages. Businesses demanding labor from workers will pay for their time and skills. Breaking down demand for labor. Demand for labor is a concept that describes the amount of demand for labor that an economy or firms is willing to employ at a given point in time. This demand may not necessarily be in long run equilibrium and is determined by the real wage firms are willing to pay for this labor and the number of labor workers willing to supply at that wage. Profit maximizing entity will command additional unit of labor according to the marginal decision rule. If the extra output that is produced by hiring one more unit of the labor add more to total revenue than it adds to the total cost, the firms will increase profit by increasing its use of labor. It will continue to hire more and more labor up to the point that extra revenue generated by the additional labor no longer exceeds the extra cost of labor. This relationship is called the marginal product of labor, that is MPL, in economics community. Common reason for shifting in labor demand: changes in the marginal productivity of labor as the technological advances brought on by computers. Number two, changes in the price of the other factors of production, including shifts in the relative prices of the labor and capital stocks. Changes in the price of an entity's output, usually from an entity charging more of their product or services. So next topic is labor as a derived demand. The demand for all factors inputs including labor is a derived demand. That is, the demand depends on the demand for products they produce. When the economy is expanding, we see a rise in the demand for labor, providing that the rise in the output is greater than the increase in the labor productivity. During a recession or slowdown, the aggregate demand for labor will decline as businesses look to cut their operation cost and scale back to production. For example, today's due to the outbreak of COVID-19, the production, most of the industry is the shutdown. That's why the labor demand is decreases in the labor market all over the world. In recession, businesses failures, plant closures, and short-term redundancies leads to reduction in the drive demand for labor. In fast-growing markets, there is often a strong rise in the demand for labor. For example, an increase in the demand for new application for smartphones and tablets causes an increase in the labor demand and then higher wage rates for application programmers. Now look at the labor demand curve. On x-axis is the labor demand and vertical axis is the current real wage rate, and labor demand curve ND is the negatively sloped. So labor demand curve for a firm is a downward sloping function of the real wage. As the real wage increases, workers become more expensive to firms and they demand less labor. So the shape of the labor demand curve, as I already explained, ND is identical to the MPN curve, which is derived as the slope of the production function. Therefore, any factor that shifts the production function will also shift the ND curve. Thank you.